Lark Bakery in Northeast Ohio, and I'm here this morning after staying up very late trying to get this video out, ultimately having to scrap the whole video that I originally made, and I am here starting over, hoping that my husband and kids will stay asleep for a while so I can do this. I have my coffee here and my toast. This is my double chocolate and dark cherry or tart cherry chocolate sourdough bread. So good. This is like my version of coffee and donuts. I definitely eat my own baking. I'm a very high carb sort of person. And the morning birds are starting to sing. It's not even light out, but they're starting. It's one of my favorite things about getting up early is hearing the morning singing of the birds. So I wanted to tell the origin story of Lark Bakery. It's only recently got a name, but this started way back in the dark ages, probably before most of you were born, in the 90s. So, I grew up in New England. I have I have 5 brothers, no sisters, so we were a large family. You can imagine all those teen boys. They ate a lot, and we made all our own bread. We didn't buy bread. So my mom and I learned from my mom how to bake very young, and she and I would take turns baking the bread that we needed. So that way, you know, she would get a break, not have to do it all the time, and I loved it. I loved baking. Yeah, so I started just, you know, baking like that. But then I got my hands on a book. We frequented so many libraries because they were all really tiny, and we went through the books really fast. We were homeschooled. We were reading all the time. Loved to read as a teenager. So I found this book at the library, and I have my own copy now. I'll show it to you. It's right here. Artisan Baking Across America by Maggie Glazer. And I could not get enough of this book. I decided to, I really wanted to bake this crusty kind of bread. So I was able to start from those recipes, and I fell completely head over heels in love with the process. So I thought, I would really like to start baking this and selling it at farmers markets. So I found another book on how to build like an outdoor bread oven. Okay, so I graduated high school, and I was not sure what I was going to do. I was not interested in going to college. I didn't necessarily want to just go somewhere, find a job, find an apartment. So I thought, I'm gonna, volunteer somewhere. And a friend had told me about this monastery that did a lot of hospitality, had lots of groups coming through, and you know, groups of kids. I absolutely loved children. And I thought, well, maybe I should check that out, because it wasn't necessarily unfamiliar to me, because I grew up around a couple of monks that we were very close to. They were like uncles to us. And this is all Eastern Orthodoxy. So I thought, well, I'm gonna see if I can go volunteer there. So I wrote to the monastery and asked if I could come and visit, and they said yes. So I got bus tickets, got on a Greyhound bus from New England to Western Pennsylvania. Took 2 days. And so it was just, that was more of the affordable way to travel rather than going by airplane at the time for me. So thankfully I made it there. I was 19 years old, and yeah, went through some rather sketchy places, interesting people. I'm glad I don't ride the bus anymore. So got to the monastery, and I was there for a week, and I absolutely fell in love. I did not want to leave. I had to leave, had to go home, and I did. But all I could think about was getting back to the monastery. And so I wrote to the abbess again, and I said, you know, can I come back for a longer stay? And she said yes. So I went back a few weeks later, and this time I did fly. In fact, I think they got me a one-way ticket to the monastery. So I flew back, and I stayed for, I think, a couple of months. And when I left to go home again, I knew that I was going to go back and eventually become a sister there. So that's what I did. I went home. I had things I had to take care of. And then November 30th of 2003, I went back and stayed. I was there for a little over a decade. So all through my 20s and into my early 30s. And so I was there, and while I was there, towards the end of my time there, the monastery was doing a large building expansion project. So this was 2013 going into 2014. And I knew that, you know, this building project was, you know, costing a lot of money. Obviously, building projects do. And I wanted to help in some way to raise money for the project. And so I had been baking a lot just for the monastery needs, for the services, for our regular consumption, for all the guests that we had as well. And I was one of the cooks too. And so it was something that I had, you know, been doing the whole time that I was there. But I asked, can I, start doing this and selling to the public? And she said, yes, I could. And we had a sign printed, put it down at the bottom of the driveway by the road that just said, bread sale today. That was it. That's all it said. People did respond. They started to come, and they, I was selling a few loaves. It wasn't a lot, but it was a decent amount. So after a few months of doing that, I decided to, I shouldn't say I decided to, with the permission of the abbess, spoke with a friend of the monastery who happened to be a writer, editor of the local newspaper. And I said, would you be willing to do an article on the bread? And she said, absolutely. I was just waiting for you to ask. So awesome. She came on one of my baking days, and she took pictures and she asked questions and wrote this article, which I still have a copy of it. You can see, I'll see if I can show you here. And it's me there testing my loaves to see if they're cool. And there's another page over here. And it's me as well in the kitchen there, getting some loaves out of the pan. Yeah, those were the days. So, I knew that article, it came out in early January 2014. And in the article, they had put my email address so that if people wanted to place orders, they could sign up and be notified of when to place the orders and what was available that week. And I knew one morning that the article had come out because suddenly my inbox exploded. I had so many requests to be added to my email list. And from that point on, I was selling so much bread. I did have a dedicated space there for baking. It had been there. I had been using it, for the regular consumption of bread that we needed. But so there was space, and we had some large refrigerators that I could chill my dough overnight and things like that. So there was a pretty good setup for selling quite a large quantity of bread. So So what I would do is I would send out an email, say these are the breads that I'm baking this week. Usually there would be 3 kinds of sourdough, 3 kinds of regular commercial yeast breads. And I was having a sale, I think, just once a week, but I was also baking bread every chance I could get, basically. And if I wasn't selling it fresh, I was freezing it. And we had a lot of guests that would come for day visits, overnight visits. And I kept a list of what was available for purchase. And a lot of times people throughout the week would also be buying whatever bread I happened to have on hand at the time. So, so this went on for the last 9 months that I lived at the monastery. And I just loved it. I loved everything. I loved the baking. I loved connecting with the customers that would come there. I also connected with a couple that ran a bed and breakfast. They would order my challah bread for their French toast. And it was just, I loved it. And it was like, it became like running a small business. I mean, I was ordering huge quantities of flour, 500 pounds at a time. And all I wanted to do was be in the bakery. Early in the morning, I get up, go to the bakery, start my baking at, I think it was about 6:30. When the morning service would start, I would take a break, go to the service, and then afterwards right back to the bakery and bake all morning. And about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, people would start showing up to pick up their orders. So, yeah, so that went on, like I said, for about 9 months. Now, I was taking that year to really pray and discern whether I was going to be taking my vows. So at this point, I'd been there for a decade, and it was time for that to happen. But I just felt like something wasn't right. So I thought, well, it's going to turn out fine in the end. Like, I just couldn't imagine that I would ever leave. Fast forward to the summer, August of 2014. And it really just suddenly became extremely clear that God had another path for me. I was just about to turn 31, and I was scared, but I knew that I had to go. It just, to continue my journey that God had me on, it wasn't there. It wasn't going to be there as I thought it was. Of course, I was talking a lot to people who are smarter and wiser than I, and helping this discernment. But I knew, I could just see down the road, I could see suddenly, this whole, picture in front of me that if I stayed, it just wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. Felt like I was going to suffocate. Those clothes that I had been wearing, the habit that I felt was protecting me, suddenly felt like a prison. And this was my experience. I think that the habit is a very beautiful thing and protective thing. But for me, it wasn't right anymore. It had been right for a very long time, and then it wasn't. And I knew I had to go. So September of 2014, I left, and I went back to my home state, Vermont. And I wasn't sure, you know, what the path ahead was going to look like. But somehow the bread baking had given me a confidence that I could make it. You know, it was a lot. You know, I had sold over 2,000 loaves, raised $15,000. I knew that if I was determined, I could make it. Of course, I had my parents and I had friends. And I went first to and stayed with a friend, a very dear friend, who had a large house, beautiful property with her dogs there. And I stayed with her for a little while, and I had, I think, $1,000 to my name, and no vehicle, no job. You know, it was scary. It was very scary the first little while. I thought, what did I do? I remember sitting outside under a tree and just weeping because I miss them. I mean, the nuns were my family. And, you know, I had spent a decade, little more than a decade, with them. Like, you know, they were my family. And so, yeah, it was really hard. But I knew I had to press forward. There was no going back. I mean, I knew that I had done the right thing, even though it was scary. So I borrowed my friend's car and I started my search for a job. I thought about, you know, what could I do? Well, in Vermont, that is the home base. That's the location, the only location of King Arthur flour. I'm sure many people who, if you are a baker, you know King Arthur flour. So, what you have to understand is I had no cell phone. I had no computer. I had really a few suitcases and $1,000. So I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna drive to King Arthur and I'm gonna find somebody there and ask them how I could apply. So that's what I did. Now, this was fall. This was beginning of October, peak foliage season in Vermont. So they're at the headquarters. So there's the store, the cafe, the bakery, and the school there. Beautiful, beautiful building, beautiful location. And I went in. It was so busy. And I was like, who can I talk to? I walked around for a while trying to get brave enough to approach somebody. Finally saw somebody and at one of the cash registers, I thought, you know what? I'll just ask her. So I went up to her and I said, you know, is there somebody I can talk to about applying for a job here? And she said, well, come with me. I will give you an application to fill out. So that's what I did. She took the application And I didn't know this at the time. I didn't find out till a while later. But she happened to be one of the managers. I'm not sure exactly her role, but she had a lot to do with hiring people. So, sure enough, I got a call to come in for an interview. I met with, now the interview was with the person who oversaw the cafe. And they hired me. So basically, I think it was about maybe 5 weeks after I left the monastery, I had a job. I got hired. And I also was able to find a car. And the King Arthur was not at all close to where I was staying, so I had to find a place to live. And it's amazing how it all works out, but I had reconnected with some old friends who I didn't know very well, but I knew from my days growing up in Vermont, and they lived about 25 minutes from King Arthur. And they had, in their basement, they had an in-law apartment, and they offered that I could live there. And that was just perfect. So grateful to them. So that's what I did. I started working at King Arthur in the cafe. I did a lot of the prep for the cooking. And I wasn't great on the line, like where they prepared the sandwiches and salads and all these sort of things, because I couldn't go fast enough. That wasn't my thing, the speed. So I was there through the winter into the summer, and it was a good experience. It was fun to work there, but eventually I knew that I needed to move on from there. It just everybody was very kind and everything, but it just didn't pay enough. So I knew I needed to find a different job in order to kind of move on with my life. And I ended up back in Pennsylvania. I'm in eastern Pennsylvania, where I became a nanny for a family with 4 kids. I was there, that was 2015 into 2016. And they ended up in the summer of 2016 moving across the country, and I did not want to go that out west. So I started looking at, where was I gonna move? And I knew I had friends in southeast Pennsylvania, and I had reconnected with them when I first moved back to PA, and they invited me to come and live with them while I got established in that area. And they lived, it was the priest and his family of a large parish there. So I ended up getting a nanny job in southeast PA, living with these old friends. And that was where I ended up meeting my husband. He grew up at the parish there, and oh my goodness, I told him, I I thought, oh, for sure, you are not my type. Told him right out that I was not going to date him. But he is a pianist. And I play the flute. Don't really play much anymore. I'm probably terrible now because I'm so out of practice. And his sister played the cello. So she kind of orchestrated like that we would get together and practice and play, and so we would get together, I don't know, once a week or so and play music. So all this time I was thinking, oh, it would be so cool to marry somebody who could play piano like that, but he is not my type. So a few months later, fast forward, and I don't know, I always had it in the back of my mind that something was going to change. I kind of felt like I love Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, love it. And I thought something is going to happen like that. It's going to be like Elizabeth in Pride and Prejudice, where, you know, she just did not like Mr. Darcy, but in the end ended up falling in love. I was like, something's going to change. And sure enough, around, I think it was between Christmas and New Year, so end of December of 2016, something changed. I saw a different side of my husband, a different side of Nick, and my heart changed. So, but you know, I was not young, so I told him, I was like, you know, if you don't know that you want to marry me, if you want to marry me in 6 months, then that's it. You know, I'm not gonna, just can't go on and on. Well, sure enough, we've been dating for about 5 months and he proposed. And we ended up getting married that same year. That was now 2017, so November of 2017. We got married, and I do have a picture here. You can see those two lovebirds. Oh, the lighting. There you go. You can see us there. Yep. Young and innocent, I always say, back then. Before you become parents, you're young and innocent. Okay, so we got married. So all this time, you know, I'm baking bread off and on. Some point after we were married, I'm gonna, you know, make a sourdough starter. So I made a sourdough starter and, you know, I'd bake here and there, still trying to perfect my technique. And, well, life got very busy because about 6 months after we were married, I got pregnant with our first daughter. And, meanwhile, I was working part-time, and, I continued that after she was born. And then in late 2019, I got pregnant with our second daughter. And then, of course, going into the winter, so I'm still working. But it was that March of 2020, of course, everybody knows that's when the pandemic hit. So May 1st of 2020, I had my last day of work, and I went home to be at home full time. It was, spring, so I was excited to start a garden. And yeah, it was just, but it was a difficult time because the pandemic, made things really uncertain. And the whole situation of giving birth at that point, restrictions of who could be at the hospital, what would happen if you tested positive for COVID. And I wanted my mom to come, but travel was very difficult. And I thought, well, surely by July, when I was due, things would be better. But of course, it wasn't. So my mom ended up not being able to come. And my husband could come, but if he left after the baby was born, then he couldn't come back. So I ended up, I was like praying, like, I want to give birth really fast because I want him to be able to go home and be with our older daughter that night. So sure enough, fast labor, 6 hours later, baby was born, 2-something in the afternoon. He stayed till about 6 that evening and then went to be with our older daughter. So I was in the hospital with our second born for 2 days by myself. And actually, I rather enjoyed it. I was very comfortable there. The hospital, I loved it. The nurses were awesome. So, yeah, so then, so I was home with then the 2 girls. And I, was busy. I was doing the garden, caring for the girls. And that was through that fall and winter and into 2021. So fast forward to fall of 2021, and I ended up interviewing for an insurance agency, and they ended up hiring me. And so I went, I had to get my license and everything. So I started working there, and again, here and there, still baking bread, still, love that, but didn't know, how I was going to develop that, part of who I was. For me, it was, since my teens, it was part of who I was this bread baking. And I still wanted to build a wood-fired bread oven on our property. I had all kinds of ideas. Maybe I would do pizzas or something. Anyway, so 2022 came, and I got pregnant with our 3rd daughter. Well, life then took a turn, and that fall we ended up moving. And that's another whole story, so I'm not going to get into that here. But ultimately, we ended up in Northeast Ohio. And fall of 2022, I was in my 3rd trimester. We first ended up, we were in Vermont near my parents. Actually in the same location as I was living when I was working at King Arthur Flour. And then from there, in the spring of 2023, ended up in Northeast Ohio. So fast forward to now, and mind you, I'm still working in insurance. I work from home. And I work part-time. So I was thinking, while I'm raising these 3 young girls, what can I do to be with them as much as possible and start selling bread again. So I started to think about how to get the word out there. Now social media is a thing. Of course, I grew up in the dark ages back when internet was not what it is now, and I didn't even grow up like really using a computer or anything like that. Technology is very difficult. Hence the difficulty getting this video out. And so how to make connections. So first of all, I love the baking process, but I also love the way that it connects people. Bread, baking, it has a way of connecting people that is very, very beautiful. And so I'm trying different avenues, all the ways that people can connect. I'm over on Instagram at LarkRise40. You can follow me there. I'm having this YouTube channel, and you can also find me on Facebook. And I really wanted to start this channel to kind of document the journey now that I have a name. Am I writing? So if you are interested in this, please subscribe and like, comment. Oh, please let me know if you have any questions. If there were things that I left out that you are interested in, I would be happy to answer your questions. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.